Okay, the first thing we're going to discuss are the cost of attending your dental school. And folks, when I do presentations for students with any kind of health sciences degree, I always talk about three different kinds of cost: opportunity cost, out-of-pocket cost, and financing cost. Now, I've got the last two highlighted because I'm not really going to spend any time on opportunity costs. Hopefully you know what those are, but when you're looking at the overall cost of your dental degree, if you were working and you gave up a job to come to dental school, well, then your opportunity cost is basically the income that you lost for the 4 years of dental school by giving up that job. If you were not already working, it would be, the opportunity cost would basically be what you would have lost in income of any kind of job you could have found during the 4 years of dental school. But we're not going to talk about opportunity cost. I want to focus on out-of-pocket costs, what it actually costs you to be there at your dental school, and financing costs. What you're looking at now is just a sample cost of attendance, or also called a financial aid budget, of a hypothetical dental school. And you'll see the breakdown: tuition and fees, book supplies, room, board, transportation, miscellaneous, for a total of $60,000. But notice that I've highlighted the last three bullets, and you're probably way ahead of me on this. The reason I did is that when you look at the cost of any dental school, there are certain items in the cost of attendance each year that you have absolutely no control over. Now, I'm sure you did your homework and you knew what the tuition and fee costs, what you were going to be charged to be there, was at your dental school before you matriculated. And hopefully you had a little bit of an idea about the book and supply cost, and those are certainly going to vary depending on what year you are in dental school. But those are things, especially the tuition and fees, you really have not much say over, if any at all. But your room and board, your living expenses, transportation, and miscellaneous expenses, those are things that I would argue you do have some control over. And in this particular example, it's actually about 30% of this particular budget. I'd encourage you to look at the cost of attendance figures at your school and figure out what percentage of your total cost comes from the living expenses, because, again, that's something you should have some control over. And that leads us to the reference to budgeting, because, guys, your ability to budget now, to get a budget, a realistic one, and stick to it, is really going to impact your repayment strategy later. And I'm real big about talking to graduates of any discipline, including dental, about protecting your choices. And you want to protect your repayment choices, whether you go straight into practice, whether you consider a residency program regardless of length, or whether you even do additional study with a postdoc program. And here's what I mean by that. We're going to look at some repayment numbers here in just a few minutes in another one of the topic sections. But for example, by protecting your choices, here's what I mean. When you get out, you might initially choose a repayment option of 25 years, knowing that you could afford a payment plan of 10 years. But the reason you choose the 25 years is not because you're forced to, because you have a lot of consumer debt and other obligations. It's possibly because you have none of those other requirements or commitments, but you're trying to finance a mortgage, and your mortgage company wants to see a lower debt-to-income ratio. You've protected your choice. You get into a 25-year repayment plan. You show your mortgage company that your debt-to-income ratio is much more favorable because your loan payments are lower, and then as soon as you're approved for the mortgage, assuming you are, you get into a faster 10-year plan and aggressively pay your loans off. You really don't have that option if you've not been budgeting wisely and you've accumulated a lot of consumer debt. So, guys, budgeting now helps protect your choices later on. You want to get into a repayment program because you chose it, not because your situation forced you into it. So, as I mentioned earlier, determine the monthly living expense component that's in your aid budget and try to stay under it. When I used to work in the financial aid offices at Emory and Georgetown, I told students, prove me wrong. When you see that budget that we came up with, it's a standard budget for you, prove us wrong, but don't prove us wrong by coming in and showing us that your budget is more expensive than what we allowed. Show us that you really don't need as much money as we have allowed in your budget. That's going to help you in terms of your debt. And speaking of which, we now want to talk about the third component of cost, financing costs. Remember, opportunity cost, the out-of-pocket cost, and now financing cost. Guys, this is the real cost of borrowing those loans that we're going to be talking about here in a moment. And no surprise, there are several factors or criteria that can influence what you're going to pay on your student loans. Certainly the most well-known or most popular is the interest rate, and we're going to look at interest rates on student loans here in just a minute. But as you look at interest rates, also keep on the radar screen what we talk about when we use the word capitalization. Capitalization refers to interest that accrues that you don't pay that your loan provider is eventually going to add back to the amount that you borrowed. So that can greatly increase the cost of your student loans. So first factor, interest rates and capitalization. Be sure you know what those are, and be sure you know what the capitalization policy is for your loan provider. Also, another thing influencing the finance cost is whether the loan is subsidized or not, and no surprise, I have no subsidy highlighted in red. Hopefully you have heard that new Stafford loans for grad and professional students have no interest subsidy. We'll talk about that in just a moment. That adds to the cost of your loans. Also influencing the cost of your loans is whether when you graduate, you're in a position where you need to postpone payments, perhaps because you're in a postdoc program or a residency program, or whether you try to immediately get after your loans and you pay immediately after graduation, which frankly is what many of your colleagues do who go right into practice. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. And certainly the repayment plan chosen. I've already referenced an extended plan of 25 years. You're going to see some numbers here shortly where if you got in a repayment plan of 25 years and you stayed in it, you would pay much more for that loan than a colleague with the exact same amount of debt would pay over a 10-year period of time. So notice again in these factors, some of these you do not have control over, and some of these you do have control over. So again, look for ways to reduce your debt and reduce your repayment cost. So to wrap this section up on the cost factor of dental school, control what you can control, and guys, just don't obsess about what you can't. Keep your consumer debt in check, and I'm preaching at you here, but your aid director and the financial aid folks have probably already done that as well. Don't let your consumer debt build up, because that's going to limit your choices when you get out of dental school. Now, the third bullet, pay interest as it accrues. Easy for me to say, more difficult to do. But if you have family members, a spouse, a partner, someone who has expressed an interest in helping you financially, and guys, maybe they've been just right up front, excuse me, and they said, look, we'd like to help you, but there's no way we can pay tuition for you for dental school. You know, maybe they helped undergrad or post-bac program, but they've indicated they'd like to help a little bit. Talk to them about the possibility, even for 1 year, of paying the interest on your loans as it accrues, because what that does is it keeps that original loan amount the same amount and can drastically reduce what you'll repay. When you get out, and yes, I'm now kind of sort of talking to you as though you are a D4, you're about to graduate and about to either start paying or get into a residency program. If you have different loans in your portfolio with different interest rates, target the payments on the worst loans if you are in an aggressive repayment strategy where you are paying more than the amount due. For example, if you've got Stafford and Grad Plus loans and you can afford more than the monthly payment, consider throwing some extra money on that more expensive Grad Plus loan. Not everybody can do that, but that's a great way to get the best bang for your buck in repayment. Use caution with private loans. We're going to talk on another section coming up here about the difference between federal and private. So be cautious about private loan borrowing. And once again, just budget wisely and borrow responsibly, and we really do think that this will help.